Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are going to rank the legendaries of set 4 in a tier list. So before we start this video, the sponsor is Card Market, the best place in Europe to buy and sell cards. So getting into the tier list, so here it is. And let's agree first on what we understand are the different categories. S tier is for format defining cards that not only are extremely powerful, are going to see a lot of play, but also are going to change the way we play the game, are going to shape the meta around them. The A's are just powerful legendaries that are going to see competitive play. B tier is a card that will see competitive play, but are going to be very niche. C is legendaries that don't currently see any play or are unlikely to see any play, but they have some potential for the future and there's some cool thing they can do, and within the same context they can be quite powerful. And finally, D tiers are the one that I think are completely unplayable. So we're going to do that ranking together, and we're going to start off by the first card, which is Annihilator. So Annihilator is a card that fits a very specific need for control decks, and this is the need of some sort of late game inevitability that get rid of a particular card that is very powerful against a specific deck. So in almost every matchup, there are certain cards in a matchup that are problematic. One of the most example for this is obviously Relentless, very strong in control, and one of the strategies to beat out control whenever is to go Relentless, Palpatine's Return. Annihilator is a great counter to this, as it allows you to put a massive threat on the board, will kill the Relentless, will be very awkward to deal with after that, because if you can't really be killed by an opponent Devastator or even an opponent Avenger, because if he does kill it, then I will kill you dude on the way back with the when defeated effect, so you have to use a specific tool to kill it. And even if it's get dealt with, this guy has done his job. He's got rid of all of the copies of Relentless in your deck. So obviously your opponent can play around this by playing Palpatine's Return to play those cards anyway, but you still have removed it. Let's say your opponent's playing 2 Palpatine's Return and 2 Relentless, you've effectively getting rid of half of those Relentlesses in one hit, which is very significant. So this card is very good for that. It's just overall a card I think the hard control decks or the blue control decks are going to need to beat Piet, notably, as if just Piet is just going to be that specific thing. And obviously it's a good card in Piet because you can discount the price down to a 9, which is not that prohibitive anymore, and then the card is pretty solid. It gives you just more late game inevitability if you're playing a Piet control deck. I think in a Piet blue deck you would probably prefer to play Devastator over this. So but you're only playing 3 copies of Devastator, then there's no harm in playing a couple of copies of Annihilator. So it is going to be a niche card because we're talking about a sideboard card for control and a card that is going to show up as a media as a 1 or 2 of in a couple of decks. So it's going to be niche, but it has some competitive application, and I am pretty positive that it's going to see play. I think the only way this card doesn't see play in competitive is if the decks that are attached to it don't see play, which I think is very unlikely. So for me, this is a B tier for Annihilator. Next, we got the Ghost. So the Ghost is basically another attempt from FFG to try to make Spectres a little bit better. And unfortunately, I think it's an unsuccessful one. The problem with the Ghost is that it doesn't have an immediate impact on the game unless it has a bunch of keywords. So obviously, it's a 5/6/4/5 that kind of gives Sentinels to everybody, but it needs to be equipped with an upgrade for you to be able to do this. And this card is already cost 5 resources, so the fact you have to pay 5 and then you have to pay some more resources to equip it so everybody can Sentinel. There's just so much that needs to go right for this to work. First of all, you need to have enough resources. You need the Ghost to survive, to be able to put an upgrade on it, or you need to have enough resources to pay the Ghost plus an upgrade, or you need to be playing R2D2, which is the only free upgrade in the game. And if that happens, you also need to have a full board, because giving Sentinel to all the other Spectres is not very useful if you don't really have other Spectres in play, which is going to be the case most of the time in a competitive game of Star Wars Unlimited. Units don't stay in play very long. So there's just like a lot of work for this card to actually work, and obviously you can give it other keyword, okay, but that's very situational. This is just not a good competitive card. It's a fun card, it's meant for casual play, but it's not good at all. And I don't, if you're going to be building, this is sad to say, but even if you're going to try to build the most competitive Hera deck possible, I don't think this card would make the cut. So this is not a good card in my opinion. Moving on, we got Hondo Ohnaka. So Hondo Ohnaka is actually not a bad card. 3/5 for 4 shielded is not terrible, and the ability is very powerful. The ability to take a non-pilot upgrade. Obviously there's shield in the game, there's experience tokens, so being able to steal them can be quite powerful. Keep in mind that you can also take control of your own upgrade and move them to a different eligible unit, so you could actually move the shield to some another unit. I can see a meta where this card could be pretty good. The problem, it has two major limitations. First of all, it is a situational card, because obviously you need to be in a meta where there's a lot of upgrades going on, whether experience, shield, or just any other upgrades. And the other problem is that it's double blue, which makes it extremely limited. The scope in which you can play this card is extremely limited. And is also quite slow, obviously. So, unfortunately, those two limitations makes that this card, I don't think this card is going to have any competitive application in the current meta, but this card has potential in the future, depending on what kind of meta we are. Maybe double blue becomes very popular. There is hope for this card to see a little bit of play. So I'm going to put this in C tier. I don't think this card is unredeemably unplayable. I just think in my opinion, they should have made it a double blue. I think that, generally speaking, as a design philosophy, I think it's a mistake to make cards both double blue and having a situational effect. I think the combination of those two things is very tough, because already being double aspect really limits you extremely in where you can be played. The fact that on top of this there is a limitation, there's a situational ability. Generally speaking, there's a lot of cards in the game that are situations that would see play if only they were not double aspect. So this is C tier for Hondo Ohnaka. Moving on now to Nebula Ignition. So Nebula Ignition is basically a bad super laser blast. The problem that it doesn't work against things that are upgraded is a massive limitation. The fact that it costs 1 more is a massive limitation. It is interesting that now Heroism has access to that kind of effect for a non-prohibitive price, but in my opinion, the only way this card is playable is if yourself you'll be playing a deck that has a lot of ways to upgrade. So I think I haven't tried this yet, and I think I would like to try it, but if you're playing a double blue Ray deck where you gotta put a lot of upgrades on units, and then you use this as a Wrath effect to kind of get rid of everything, and you don't get rid of your own unit because most of them are upgraded thanks to Ray. I think in this kind of deck, this can have potential. You have the ability to slow down the game a lot if you're playing a double blue deck, because you get to play a lot of Sentinels, you get to play a lot of heals, and having a removal that can get rid of the entire board in one swing can be very valuable. Can you get there? Is it strong enough? Is it just not? The fact that it doesn't get rid of enemy upgraded unit, is that really a problem? All those questions kind of have to be answered for this to know for sure if this is playable or not. But in my opinion, I'm going to put this in low C tier. I don't think this is unredeemably unplayable. I think I can see a world where this card can be good. Next we got the Executor. So the Executor, I made this point before, is definitely the worst of the two Super Star Destroyers. The problem with this card is like it's very, very slow. It doesn't have an immediate impact on the game, in a sense that you can't attack right away with the tokens that you generate. It leaves stuff behind when it dies, which is nice. But putting a bunch of TIE Fighters in play is not a very impactful play when it happens that late in the game. So in my opinion, Executor is just simply not a very good card. If it does something unique, well, in the sense that it's one of the only major big capital ship that is that can be annoying to deal with sometimes. It also gets out-countered very hard by No Glory Only Results, which is right now one of the most played single target removal in the game, and that's another major issue for the Executor. With all that being said, it does perform. I can see a world where Executor could be better than Relentless. So I think if you're playing a green black and you want to find a package, a late game package to beat out control, my take is like you're probably better off. Let's say you already have the 3 Devastators, you're playing a Piet deck, you already have the 3 Devastators. You're probably better off going after sideboards 2 Relentless, 1 Executor, rather than triple Relentless to go alongside your Palpatine's Return. Because once again, we talked about earlier about the Annihilator that can get rid of your Relentlesses. So now you get at least an Executor that is like another option that you can play that you're not going to be getting rid of. And it's another thing that can be very annoying to deal with if the opponent doesn't have the right tools. Unfortunately, with No Glory Only Results being there is actually a way to counter this. It's pretty hard. But if it does not get countered, that can be kind of a problem. So maybe for diversity's sake, and just to have like a diversity of different options against control, I can see the Executor maybe squeezing as a one-of in some sideboard if we are in a very control-heavy meta. So I'm going to put this in C tier. I don't think it's unredeemably unplayable. I just think there's just better things to do, but it's not. I can see a world where you just to diversify here the late game answers. There's a situation where Executor is going to be better than Relentless against control, and in those situations you're going to be happy to have a 2-1 split instead of just having a 3 of the Relentless. The other question is, do you really need that many sideboard cards against hard control? The answer is probably no, but if you do, then at least the option is there. Then we have Scramble Fighters. So Scramble Fighters is, in my opinion, very bad. First of all, basically the fact that the unit comes into play ready, but they can't attack bases, that just is very bad because, I mean, obviously you can kind of sucker. That's just a very inefficient removal. If you're spending 7 resources and using all your TIE Fighter just to attack the enemy and crash into the enemy units, then you're basically just paying a very expensive removal. It's not that good in my opinion. It's also very slow in terms of action efficiency. You have to spend forever to actually kill those dudes. You will lose the initiative most likely, and your opponent will have a million years to attack with all of his units before they actually get destroyed. So using the Scramble Fighters as a removal is pretty bad, and using this as a token generator is also pretty bad. I think there's just better things to do in the game. Me personally, even if I wanted to play something like this, I would probably prefer to play Timely Reinforcement. So Timely Reinforcement costs 5, and it generates as many 2/2s that basically as the amount of resources your opponent divided by 2. So if your opponent has like 6 resources, you're gonna get 3 X-Wings. So let's say if you're playing this at the same time when your opponent is on 8 resources, you're generating 4 X-Wings for 2 less resources than Scramble Fighters. And in my opinion, having 4 2/2s is stronger than having 8 1/1s. And especially since on the first round where they come into play, they actually have Sentinel. They also have the flexibility of being played earlier in the game. It's just a way more flexible card. Giving Sentinels makes that those cards actually has an immediate impact on the game if you want to prevent an aggro deck from taking over. In my opinion, if you want to play something like this, you are much better off going for Timely Reinforcement than Scramble Fighters. So yeah, just the fact that there's just literally a better version of that card in the same set is just the death sentence for this card. So in my opinion, Scramble Fighter is really not a good card. Moving on, we got the Starhawk. I've been a pretty big fan. This probably been one of my favorite card to play with in terms of like fun factors. Just such a fun card to play with. It is expensive, but the effect, if you are built around it, is very powerful. There's obviously the combo I mentioned with between the Endless Legion and Starhawk. The fact you can play Starhawk and then Endless Legion for 8 and just basically win the game. Does that mean, is that necessary? Do you really need to play Endless Legion to make the Starhawk? No, absolutely not. I think if you're playing a deck that ability to draw, or a deck that plays a lot of smuggles, Starhawk becomes completely insane if it stays alive. And yeah, so it's just a good card. It is definitely very expensive, and obviously there's still a lot of things that can kill it. And the problem with this card is like it's very expensive, and it doesn't leave. And if it gets dealt with right away, it kind of not really anything behind unless you've ambushed something. So it is a good card, but it is definitely not going to see a tremendous amount of play. It's going to depend if there's going to be a deck that it does something very unique. I could put this card in B tier. I don't know 100% if there's going to be a competitor that's going to be willing to play that card, because it is very, very expensive. And if your Starhawk kind of stays alive, the problem is like against aggro, this card is just too expensive. If you're playing against control, the odds of the Starhawk surviving are relatively low. So the situations where the Starhawk is good remains relatively limited. It's good against mid-range, or it's good against late-game value deck that don't have a lot of removals. So it's not, as I said, it's not good against everything, and the fact that it's very specialized like this kind of is a deterrent to how much it's going to see play, because, as I said, against control, you can just kill it right away, and it's not going to leave any value behind. So you really want to play this card against a deck that doesn't play that plays relatively late, but doesn't have that so many removal, and there are relatively few decks that do that in the current game. There are a few, but they're not that many. So this is kind of like the problem with the Starhawk at the moment. So I'm gonna put this in B tier. It's a good card, but I don't think it's gonna see that much play because of those weaknesses I've talked about. Next we got Unity of Purpose. Okay, so I've dunked on this card, saying it was one of the worst cards ever printed. And forced to admit, I was wrong. Unity of Purpose does something that no other card in the game can do. I've talked about, yeah, this is basically a worse version of Assault Pattern Delta. And yes, most of the time it is, but if you build your deck around this card, you can do something very nasty. So I'm mostly thinking about basically the combination between Rex and Droid Manufactory, so you can kind of like go for Rex plus Droid Manufactory, deploy a bunch of different units. If you're already playing a deck that plays a lot of sticky threats, or you got a lot of units going on, then suddenly you go next turn with Unity of Purpose, and you play Unity of Purpose, you give +7/+7 to everybody. There's certain decks that simply just cannot deal with this, and it's definitely more game ending than Assault Pattern Delta would ever want. So basically, in order to play this card, you need to play it in an extremely unfair you need to really play around it and really maximize its effect. And if you do, the card is basically game ending. It's really fortunate that Unity of Purpose just happens that Rex Droid Manufactory, which is the perfect combination for this card, just happens to be in double green, because usually when a card has a situational effect and also has double aspect, just as I said with Hondo Ohnaka, usually it doesn't see any play. But in this case, it's just very fortunate for Unity of Purpose that exactly the right leader plus base combination happens to be in the same color as the card. And all of this contributes to make Unity of Purpose good in that specific deck. Now the big question is this deck going to be competitive or not? My answer is, it is probably some matchups, some decks that can't really do anything against it, which is nice, but unfortunately the vast majority of the decks in the game can deal with this without any problems. So they just basically just kill your units. They kill you before you get the time to pull the combo. If they're very aggro, they tap you down like we know that Django can do. They play like some sort of AoE effect that kills everything. It's just a very easy strategy to counter. The deck just concedes on Barrage basically, which is one of the most played, which is the best card in Star Wars Limited and one of the most played card. So the deck just is kind of gimmicky, and I don't think it's going to be a very competitive deck. So for that reason, I cannot justify putting it in B tier. I'm going to put it in C tier, but this card is definitely over-delivered on what it's capable of doing. So I'm going to put this in C tier, on top of C tier. So yeah, I'm admitting that I was wrong about this card. To be fair, it's a very specific build that you need to play, and once again, I don't think this deck is that competitive. It has loads of weaknesses, but it's definitely a fun archetype and definitely something that is interesting. Okay, now we get into another card that I dunked on very early on, but I since then corrected myself multiple times, so I'm not gonna repeat over again. Turbolaser Salvo, yes, it's a worse version of Overwhelm Barrage, but basically Piet needs more copies of Barrage. Barrage is so important for the Piet deck to function properly. It needs more copy of it, and Turbolaser Salvo is, in some situations, it's better than Barrage, but 99% of the case it's worth, but that's fine. It's another way for us to clean the board whenever we manage to put a big units in play, which is fairly easy to do in this deck. So for this, I'm going to put this in B tier. I'm going to put this below the Executor. It's not an amazing card, but it does the job, and there just happens to be a deck that needs it. So next we got Darth Vader. So Darth Vader, I don't know if there's going to be a deck for it in the meta that's going to be wanting to play this card, but forced to admit that this card is pretty good. There's just so much it does. First of all, of course, the pilot for 3. I always say it before I say it again. Pilot that costs 3 are significantly better than pilot that costs 2 most of the time, because you can curve into them. You can go turn 1 play, you play a space unit in space, and then turn 2 you get into pilot. So it's way more curve efficient, while the 2 drops pilots are a bit more awkward, because you go turn 1. You can obviously not play them on turn 1 because you need a space units to be able to pilot them. And then on turn 2, you are kind of left with that leftover resources you can't do anything with. So in my opinion, generally speaking, I much prefer the pilot that costs 3 than pilots that cost 2. And Darth Vader delivers on this pretty well, +3/+3 with a powerful on-attack ability. The attack ability is very powerful, guys. So it's in my opinion is probably one of the best pilots available in villainy. So if you are in a deck that really wants pilot, then Vader is going to be for you. And as a ground unit, the unit is not bad. A 7/7 for 6 is nothing to snuff at. It's the best stats for 6 drops you're ever going to see in the game. And the fact that it can be used obviously in combination with ECL means that you can ECL, you can one-shot a Django with this, and you're going to be left with 4 HP left over, which is very healthy. So it's in my opinion, it's a good card. It's a solid card. Darth Vader is kind of suffer from that problem. Is like, usually you want a card to do one thing very well instead of doing a lot of different things relatively well. So I still think it's going to be a niche card, because I think that pilots are not so amazing in the current meta, mostly because of Django. Because you just equip something and you just get tapped down. It's just very awkward. It's very risky to play an upgrade onto a unit, and obviously there's upgrade removal and all that. So for that reason, I cannot justify putting in the A tier. I'm going to put it on top of B tier. Then we got Devastator, obviously. So Devastator is the best legendary in the set. I think everybody can agree on this. And in my opinion, so that's the debate of whether we just think it's a great card that's going to see a wide amount of play, or if we think that this is meta defining, so it would be S tier in this case. In my opinion, 100% Devastator is meta defining for 2 major reasons. The first reason is that it basically makes Piet Red so incredibly powerful. I think Piet Red is going to be a strong force in the meta. In the meta, it's just the ability to play Devastator on turn, I think it's on turn 4, so you go basically turn 2 ramp, turn 3 deployment of Piet, play a 6 drop you have, a 6 drop or 7 drop, and then next turn play Devastator. The fact that you can play it on turn 4 is just completely insane. It's a card that if you don't, it has an immediate impact on the game that is very powerful. The flexibility of being able to kill a lot of stuff. And if you don't answer it, you will die, because the ability to assign indirect damage is insane in combination with Planetary Bombardment. So you've got Planetary Bombardment in hand, you've basically won the game. And even if you don't have the Planetary Bombardment, just attacking for 9 is just insane. It's obviously insane with combination with Triple Dark Raid. So that first reason is like it's amazing in Piet, and Piet is going to be one of the strongest decks in the meta. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 that makes Devastator so powerful is how powerful it is in Django. I think Django love this card. It gives it the late game, that the ultimate late game card, the ultimate finisher, comes to play, will deal the last bit of damage that he needs to kill. And if you don't you can also just spread the damage across the board and tap multiple things at once, as well as leaving a massive unit behind. It's amazing with triple attack rate. So this card is going to be insanely impactful on the meta. It's for me, it's going to be an S tier, an easy S tier. I think if I had to remake my ranking of my ranking videos of all the cards, I would probably put this somewhere in the top 3. I definitely should have put this somewhere in the top 3. I mean, those rankings are very difficult to do when I do them 1 week before the release. But yeah, if I had to revise my ranking, I would probably put this much higher in the list. Next, we got the Profundity. So Profundity is, as we know, an entire control card. I think it completes Great Dragon very well. Great Dragon is very good when your opponent has a late game card, whenever you're playing a red deck, if you want to basically beat a hard control deck, whenever a control deck is running out of gas. Because then if it sticks, it just becomes unbeatable and it's basically answer or die. While Profundity is a bit different. Profundity is better against a deck that has a lot of resources in hand. So if you are in a situation where your opponent has a lot of cards in hand and you want to basically provide insane value, and Profundity does this extremely well. So in my opinion, it completes Great Dragon very well. Whether you think you need Profundity more or you think Great Dragon more, it comes down to your experience. How does the control matchup usually go with the deck you're trying to build, and then depending on if you prefer for Profundity, if you prefer Great Dragon, you will kind of like switch between two and kind of see which one is better. So it is a niche card, but I think it does this job very well. I like this card a lot, so I'm going to put this in B tier. I'm going to put this in somewhere in the B tier. I think it's a solid card. It's going to see play, but it's going to be quite niche. Then we got a Shadowcaster. So I don't really like this card, and the reason is because it's a 6-drop with no immediate impact on the board, so that already by itself is detrimental. And the problem is that it also needs a lot of other stuff to work. You need to have a when defeated unit in play to be able to benefit from the effect, and you need to have a way to sacrifice that unit. So when this is an ability that is on your leader, that is a whole different game because it's always available and you don't need any work for it. But when you have to spend 6 resources to get that ability, it's really a very different story. It does make the ability so much worse. So the fact that it's stacked with Thrawn is interesting, but unfortunately I don't think that's worth it. I don't think spending your entire turn 5 to drop a Shadowcaster on the board just to get a bit more value out of your when defeated effect, I don't think that's worth it. I don't think that's even close to be worth it. So in my opinion, this card is not worth it at all. I think it's unplayable. Even in a dedicated Thrawn red deck, I think this card is way too slow and no immediate impact on the game, and the impact that it has is very weak. So I'm gonna put this between Scramble Fighters and the Ghost. Moving on, we got Planetary Bombardment. So Planetary Bombardment is pretty much sees as much play as Devastator, because in my opinion, if you're running Devastator, you should be running Planetary Bombardment as well. Whether it is in your main deck or in your sideboard, you should be running Planetary Bombardment, because Planetary Bombardment is so insane in combination with Relentless, it's not even fair. And most likely if you're playing Relentless, Devastator, you're also probably playing Raider at the very least, so you got other capital ship to capitalize on. So this card is insane. But really what pushed me to put this card in S tier and not in A tier is the fact that this card is indeed is one of the ultimate answer against hard control. I think that it's going to be very difficult to play hard control in this meta because this card exists. Because it's very easy to find a timing window where your opponent has no unit in play, and then this card just becomes 8 damage to base to face directly for 6 damage, which is very powerful against hard control. This ability to deal that mass of damage directly to face against hard control is incredibly powerful. And the fact that it gets even bigger if you get capital ship is very great. So obviously there's a combination with Devastator, which is insane. There's the fact it's just really good in capital ship decks, which we know will be very competitive thanks to Piet. But not only that, I think just straight up as a card that you put like this, it's just a very strong card against hard control. Hard control just doesn't know how to beat this card. because it doesn't know how to beat something that just deals 8 damage out of nowhere. This is very difficult to out heal this amount of direct damage for a deck. So just for that reason, this card is going to have a strong impact on the meta, and in my opinion is worthy to be an S tier card. Next we got Invincible. Invincible is a very solid card. I think it's going to see play in Piet Yellow if you're playing a Piet Yellow, because 6/6 for 5 in space is very strong. You get to deploy your leader at the same turn as you play Invincible, so you get to bounce a unit that costs 3 or less on the same turn, and it's very strong obviously with I forgot the name. With Count Dooku. Count Dooku, who basically can play this card as early as turn 2, because it has the cost reduction from being a separatist. So that's just undeniably very strong. Are we going to see Piet Yellow and Dooku Yellow being a driving force of the meta? I don't know, but it is definitely going to be a strong addition for those decks. So for me, this is our first A tier, just a very solid card overall. That's going to see some competitive play. I don't think it's going to be meta defining, but it's going to see some competitive play. Then we got the new Han Solo. So a lot of people were very excited about this card, and rightfully so, but I said it before, right from the beginning, I said that this card is good, but it does deserve you to play in a certain way and play a certain type of cards in order to make it good. In order to make Pilot worth it, you need to be playing a critical mass of vehicle cards. And in this case, even more so with the Millennium Falcon. So that just limits how much this card is going to see play. 4/5 Ambush for 5 is simply just not that good in the current meta. And that's also a problem. Of course, the flexibility of having to be able to play it as a 4/5 for 5 is nice, but I think that a lot of people were kind of like deceived by the power of this card. The piloting is undeniably very strong if you're playing an aggressive deck, having to basically deal 2 damage to base right away, kind of as a surprise strike, but as a surprise strike that gives a +2/+3 permanent style line to your unit. That, in my opinion, is by itself very, very strong. So if you're playing a lot of vehicles and you're playing yellow, white, you should 100% play Han Solo. But don't overestimate the impact that this card is going to have on your deck. It's a strong card, but it's not like the game changer that some people were thinking it would be. So it's a strong card, and you should definitely, if you're playing a lot of vehicle, you should definitely be playing Han Solo. With that being said, I don't think you should change. I don't think, for example, if you're playing double yellow Han, I don't think you should modify your deck just in order to accommodate this card. I don't think this card is worth that. So it's a very solid card. It's going to see a lot of play, but it's not going to be a game changer. So in my opinion, this is a typical A tier card. I'm going to put it over the Invincible. Next, we got the new home one. This card is cute in combination with the Hate That Shape. You can give squadrons to your opponent, and then the opponent will have 3 or more space unit, and then you get to get a discount, and you get a double discount, which allows you to play home one for basically 4 resources, because you have to pay for the on my ship. You get 2 6 cost reduction, 6 minus is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4. So yeah, you can play this for 4, which is pretty incredible. Assuming your opponent has a space unit, of course, at the beginning of the turn. And then you get to kill that space unit and you leave 7/8. That's really strong. Outside of this, once you have to pay 6 for it, it's okay, but not amazing. And then obviously if you have to pay 9 for it, it's absolutely unplayable. So it's a cute card. The fact that it makes that you can run it in combination with the Hate That ships makes it so there's a situation where it's actually quite good. But obviously a card that relies on another card to be good, usually not that good, unless this card is insane, and Home1 is definitely not that. So I'm gonna put this in C tier. I'm gonna put this over the I'm gonna put this under the Unity of Purpose. It's a cute card. I don't think it is competitive though. I don't think this combo is particularly competitive. I think it's fine, but it's not particularly competitive. So I'm gonna run this C tier. Maybe there's gonna be a meta where this card goes up. I mean, maybe Piet is gonna be good enough that, but once again, it's always gonna rely on the Hate That ship. Maybe I'll put this on top of C tier. Maybe. Moving on, we got the Stolen AT Hauler. This card was definitely very different from everything we've seen before. I think the conclusion that people have is like, I think it's really good. It's good in Kazuda. You don't want to play this against any deck. You want to run this in a deck that really has specific things against it. So you don't want this to run this anywhere. But I think it's better in Kazuda Yellow specifically because Kazuda Yellow has access to a new advantage that can get the stolen Tiolo on your side if you get stolen. I don't think it's good against everything. You have to play it specifically in Kazuda, and even in Kazuda, you're not going to be wanting to play this against anything. But against the right decks, this card is really, really strong. So for me, it's going to see play. Kazuda is one of the most competitive leaders in the set. So I'm going to put this in at the bottom of A tier. Really, you could argue to put it in B tier because it is a little bit situational. But yeah, it's basically between B tier and A tier. I'm going to put it at bottom B tier, A tier. Then we're going to Radiant 7. This card is pretty nice with triple Dark Raid. If you're playing an aggro deck that plays triple Dark Raid, Radiant 7 is playable in that because it has immediate impact on the game. So for me, the only deck that really wants to play this card is basically Piet Yellow, who plays triple Dark Raid. This allows you, it's a good triple Dark Raid target, and you can run it alongside your Piet deploy. You can basically deploy Piet and play Radiant 7 on the same turn, so you can play this card effectively, very consistently on turn 3, which is pretty, and then on turn 3 this card is pretty good. Obviously, it's also good in combination with, so yeah, the fact that you give -1, the fact that the -1 damage does not apply to leader is, in my opinion, a thing that really kind of is kind of icky about this card, because then, I mean, your opponent can just put the indirect damage on his leader and it basically has no impact. So that's pretty much the only thing that is very icky about this card, is that unfortunately it doesn't work on leaders. The malices don't work on leaders. But outside of this, I think this card is a pretty. I still think this card is worth playing in a Piet Yellow. It's very niche, but I think it does work in a specific deck. I'm gonna put this at the bottom of C tier. Next we got Death Star Plans. I'm gonna be honest, guys, I haven't had the chance to play with this card myself. However, I know some people who did, and they're telling me this card is unplayable. I'm gonna rely on their judgments and say that, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think this card has, at least at the moment, it doesn't have the application that will allow you to run this without this backfiring against you. There's obviously an insane amount of counters to this card. It's very difficult to play effectively. If you're playing in a control deck, your opponent will just kill the unit and you will have wasted an upgrade and the unit at the same time. If you're playing it's an aggro deck, it will very easily take control over it, and then this card is going to backfire against you. Yeah, I don't see yet a combination that makes this card worth it, but it has a very unique effect, and I can see in the future how this could be combined with something else to become insane. So, are we putting this in D tier or are we putting this in C tier? It does something very unique, and I think there's a world where this is gonna see some play. If it's like you let's say you can put this on a card that cannot be attacked or something like this, and for that potential alone, we already seen, by the way, a card that cannot be attacked. There's the Sabine. It comes into play a little bit too late at 4 for this to ever be worth it, and it's only when she's exhausted that she cannot be attacked. So we need something that's straight up cannot be attacked, like ever. And then this Star Plan can become very powerful. So for that potential alone, I'm willing to put this in C tier, just for that potential here of what it can possibly do. And here it is. This is my tier list for the legendary. I'll just repeat here how I rank these things. S tier is meta defining. A tier is gonna see a significant amount of competitive play. B tier is it's gonna be niche, but it's likely to see some competitive play. C tier is it's not gonna see competitive play, but it has some potential for the future, or it has some combos that are interesting that you can play, that you can be successful with. And then D tiers are basically unplayable legendaries. That's basically how I ranked those. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if there's things that you would change. And as usual, if you like that kind of video, like and subscribe. And just to go back to card market, I just wanted to let you know that you can pick up Planetary Bombardment for less than 20 euros. It goes for 18 euros here in English in a near mint condition. So definitely a good pickup. This is going to be a card that's going to see a lot of play. And as opposed to the Devastator, which is going to be featured in the Store Showdown promos that I'm assuming a lot of people will be able to put their hands on, Planetary Bombardment here, there's no other ways to get this card than through the weekly pack, so through the boosters. So for that reason, I actually anticipating Planetary Bombardment to eventually becomes more expensive than Devastator at some point, especially since in terms of playability, those cards are always going to be played more or less together. Thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.